Okay, so here's a question that was asked over email. This is problem 3.3.13. And I'm not sure if you can see it there, but they're asking us to determine whether the statement is true or false. And if P is true, then P and Q implies P is false. And they want us to identify whether that's true or false. Let me write it out so it's bigger. So P and Q implies P. And they're telling us, they're defining that P is true, okay? And then the question is, what is the result of this? If we were to analyze this, is this whole statement going to be true or false given that P is true? Okay, well, really what we have to do here in order to be able to answer this question is we have to look at these two different charts. We have to look at the conjunction chart, and then we have to look at the conditional chart. And that's really what this question is asking. It's a tricky way of asking whether you know these charts or not. Okay, so if we take a look at, let's just look at our basic conjunction chart here. P and Q, and then P and Q. Remember, you always start P out as true, true, false, false. And then Q is true, false, true, false. Okay? Our conjunction table, remember, the only time the and is true is when both of them are true. So the rest of these will be false. Okay? All right, now let's analyze this. If they're saying that P is true, and we want to ask ourselves the question, can I identify what the truth value of P and Q is given that P is true? Let's take a look at it. If P is true, I have one of these two situations. I have one of these two, hold on a second. Sorry, noise in the hallway, so I'm trying to get that not on the video, so I had to need to shut my door. Anyways, if we want to analyze P and Q here, and you know, can we determine the truth value of P and Q given that we know that P is true? If we take a look at it, P is true here and P is true here. In both of these situations, if you take a look at the result, one is true and one is false, depending on what Q is. So we actually can't, off the top of you know, we can't just identify whether this is going to be true or false here, this piece of it, okay? But if we take a look at our conditional table, so we have a P column and a Q column, and P implies Q. True, true, false, false, and true, false, true, false. Remember that our conditional table looks like this. It's true, false, true, true. Okay. So if we know that our P is true, and this could be a little bit confusing, but the P here, we know that this is a true value. Okay. So really what we're looking at is true and something else. We don't know, you know, whether that Q there is true or false, implies something true. And we want to know the truth value of that. Take a look at this here. If you look at your conjunction or your conditional table, and if your Q is true, and even though it's saying P up here, P is in the position of Q on our conditional table. It's the thing after the arrow. So the thing after the arrow is equating to Q here. So if I take a look at in the position of Q, what's true? It's this spot and this spot. And notice that both of those end up being true. So regardless of whether this piece right here is true or false, whether this is true or false, regardless of that, if the second piece in my conditional is true, then my result will end up being true. And this is why, you know, it's not helpful over here to analyze our AND chart, because what they're really wanting us to analyze in this problem is if the second part of a conditional is true, then the overall statement will always be true. That's what they're trying to get you to understand from this particular example. Okay, so when they ask you to identify if it's true or false, this, given that P is true, your answer is that it's true. Oh wait, This ends up being true, but to answer their question, okay, gosh, this is kind of a confusing question, because if P is true, then they're saying that it's false, but it's actually not false. It's true. This is true, which makes their answer of false false. So the answer that they want you to answer there is false. Okay. True replies to, you know, what we actually analyzed, but to answer their question, it's false because they're saying it's false, which is false. I can guarantee you I'm not going to ask you something that confusing on an exam. Okay.